Okay, folks, 7 new cards, including one of the craziest ones I've seen that features this guy. We got a lot to talk about.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Yeah, if you don't have a lot of time, you can hit the quick reviews link in the description to see my 5-star ratings. Otherwise, let's jump into some detailed discussion of these crazy cards. All right, up first here we have one of the craziest cards I've seen in a while. This is Mogu Cultist, a 1-mana 1/1 neutral with a battle cry. If your board is full of Mogu Cultists, sacrifice them all and summon Highkeeper Ra. And Highkeeper Ra is a 2020 that reads, at the end of your turn, deal 20 damage to all enemies, which is just totally ridiculous and awesome and super cool. But trying to figure out how to get this to go off, I haven't had a whole lot of time to think about it, but I'm already struggling a ton. The first thing that came to mind for me was a card like Glinda Crowskin, right? Which gives your cards Echo, and then you could just Echo your 1-mana Mogu Cultist, and that's super easy. But you also have to destroy your Glinda Crowskin because she can't be on board anymore. So not only does she have to like stay alive or be cheap enough, you've got to be able to destroy her, or maybe like a summoning portal that helps you get it all out in one turn. There are a ton of shenanigans required to figure out how to get all this stuff on board, which makes this a pretty difficult combo to achieve. Probably both in Wild, but especially in Standard format. Maybe there are going to be more cards that come along that help you achieve this. So the question comes, is it competitively viable? Well, I'm going to go ahead and just say, even if you do get this off and you successfully achieve this combo, I don't even know if it's a game-winning combo necessarily. It certainly could be. You could just deal lethal damage to your opponent with Highkeeper Ra. But if they're like a warrior or a druid or somebody with 45 health and you do this, they might just be able to kill your Highkeeper Ra and you're just stuck with nothing to do, and you've wasted all this effort and time and energy on a combo that wasn't actually even technically an OTK. So when I compare this to cards like Mechathune, for instance, I feel like that's a far better win condition to achieve because Highkeeper Ra isn't necessarily a win condition. So I do think this card falls strictly into meme territory as opposed to, competitively viable territory. There might be somebody out there who figures it out, and, certainly summoning a 20/20 that deals 20 damage is still a win condition of sorts. It's probably going to win you most games if you can achieve that. Not all decks are going to be able to sustain through that, but I just don't think it's surprisingly enough good enough to be the thing you build your deck around. And what that means is, despite how cool this is and how much fun it's going to be and all the highlights it might create, I'm not certain it's going to get there from a reliability standpoint. It seems very hard to do, but also just the actual output is not necessarily all that good either. It's great, don't get me wrong, but in the scale we're talking about, it's not an instant win. So what that means is this sadly falls short in both directions. Here we have the Torte Pilgrim, an 8-mana 5/5 for Mage. The battle cry, discover a copy of a spell in your deck and cast it with random targets. So this is pretty directly an upgrade to the card Tortollan Primalist we saw previously from Unguro. Moving over to Mage, it's got a bigger stat line as a 5/5, and you get to discover the spell being pulled from your deck, which means you have a little bit more control and can potentially get better things on average. So for instance, you might get like a Flame Strike, and you're pretty excited because you got a board clear that would normally cost you 7 mana, but you only spend 8 and you got a 5/5, kind of making it like a 1-mana 5/5, giving you a little bit more influence on board. You might get a Luna's Pocket Galaxy, just helping you find that a little bit faster if it was hiding in the bottom of your deck. And then it's like you got a 3-mana 5/5, which is still reasonable. Unfortunately, though, you might also get things like Conjurer's Calling, and that could be risky if your opponent has a board, because you may not cast it on your own stuff. You might cast it on your opponent's stuff. You could also just get a bunch of low-cost spells, which is what Mage currently likes to run, and then suddenly maybe you're spending, like 7 or 6 mana on a 5/5, and it's still a random target, which is kind of risky. So sometimes it can feel bad if they're not those universally good spells. So there are certainly some high roll scenarios with Tortollan Pilgrim, and the high rolls are controllable, which is good because of the Discover pool, but can still backfire, which means this card comes with an inherent amount of risk. The question is, will that be worth it? I don't think so in most cases. I think this is just too late game of a play to take on that much risk. Like, this is the point where you're trying to do very specific things, win the game, and this one doesn't seem consistent enough to me. There's a little bit of deck restriction building on it too, like you have to build your deck in a way to support Tortollan Pilgrim, which could be tough, but I think a card like this could be played in a Reno deck if you are running a Reno Mage, if that's possible, Highlander, whatever you want to call it. Cards like Tortollan Pilgrim can help you get there and can even help you find extra copies of things that you might want to of, but you couldn't run because of the fact that you have no duplicate restrictions. So essentially, there is a path towards play for this card. I don't think it'll be a choice card for every Mage deck by any means, but it still has that angle of playability in Reno-style decks just to get you enough stuff, get you enough reasonable plays. Tortollan Pilgrim could certainly fit there. Moving on to our next Mage card here, we have Cloud Prince, a new 5-mana 4/4 with an elemental tag and a battle cry. If you control a secret, deals 6 damage. So this looks a lot like the card Sunreaver War Mage, but instead of dealing 4 damage, it does 6, which is a nice little upside, and it has a different condition. Instead of needing a big spell in your hand, you have to have a secret, which can be advantageous in some ways. It can be a much more aggressive card, because you don't have to run all these big, heavy-ended spells, and this can be like a fireball with a body attached, which actually seems pretty powerful. 6 damage is kind of ridiculous. That's a lot. So whether you need to kill a big thing or just go face, Cloud Prince certainly has some outs there. Like I think the 2 damage difference is meaningful and significant. It's just a lot of damage bundled into a single card. But the challenge is you do have to spend a little bit of mana to activate your Cloud Prince, and sometimes it can be hard to keep a secret around, especially in standard format right now, without a card like Ice Block, which is really good in Wild because it's a secret you can play and it's going to stay up for a while. You can predict, at least a few turns usually when you play your Ice Block early in the game, which makes cards like Medivh's Valet, which has the same condition as Cloud Prince, really reliable because you're going to have a secret. And that card is so cheap too that it's easier to play a secret in the same turn and activate your Medivh's Valet. Cloud Prince doesn't have that luxury in standard format right now. Some secrets are really difficult to keep active. Counter spells and mirror entities, any kind of play-based card like that is tough. Spellbinder can be a little bit more reliable. Splitting Image can be a bit too, but those are generally considered weaker secrets. So what that means is Cloud Prince is going to be a little bit harder to get off than we've historically seen with this style of effect. Particularly if you need to play it in the same turn, suddenly that's like an 8-mana commitment, unless you've got Kirin Tor Mages, which can certainly help, but those are doing their own thing anyway. So I do think this has some consistency and reliability challenges. There are going to be instances where this is just a 5-mana 4/4, and you aren't super pumped about that. But if there is a secret Mage deck that develops, this is certainly a possibility for it. It's even got an elemental tag, so there's some sideways synergies there that could be nice as well. And that means, yes, this card is playable. The upside on it, the result, if it works, is so powerful that I think it's worth it to try to build a deck that supports it. The question is that upside going to go off consistently? Maybe not. So I do see some hurdles in the way for this one. Our next card here is the new Arcane Flakmage, a 2-mana 3/2 that reads, after you play a secret, deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. So another secret synergy card for Mage. This is cool. Maybe we're going to get a return of Secret Mage. And this one's more about kind of a defensive board clear style card, whereas our last one I think was more about just raw damage output, even if it could be used as a board swing for single target stuff. This one has a lot of potential power level because it's not only hitting all minions, but it's also a repeatable effect. So if you can play multiple secrets with this, you're going to get multiple instances of that 2 damage, helping you clear some pretty big boards at the end of the day. The challenge again is how consistent can this card be, right? So theoretically, you can play this on curve on turn 2, follow it up with a secret on turn 3, and that would be a really nice on curve play. It is a 3/2, so it's kind of fine on turn 2. Not the most exciting development, still very susceptible to all kinds of removal spells and backstabs and so on and so forth. But reasonable stat line for a 2-drop. I think a 2/3 would be far better for survivability's sake, but we'll take it. And if you can kill a couple things of your opponents, or at the very least chip away at their board with your secret on turn 3, that would be an amazing play. Maybe you get a Kirin Mage to boot, and you're excited. But I think even on something like turn 5, just being able to play this along with a secret is a pretty powerful play too. It has that cheap mana flexibility that our previous card didn't, so it's a little easier to slot this into a turn and still have it make an impact. So you can kind of wait until it lines up nicely. The challenge there is that you have to hold your secret maybe to a sub-opportune moment where it's like, well, the secret would be good now, but maybe I gotta wait till next turn to play it with a Flakmage in order to find some damage. So you can compromise on your secret efficacy a little bit. If you do that, it's a tough one. But nonetheless, I think there's still enough upside here that it looks like a powerful secret synergy card in a direction that we haven't really seen before. So maybe this shifts Secret Mage a little bit more mid-rangey or even towards the control deck where it's able to do some defensive stuff, stay up on the board thanks to a card like this, dump a bunch of secrets at once, clear the board, and make some big, 8 mana play essentially at the end of the game. That is where I see this card surviving and thriving the most. As a turn 2 curve play, I think it's far riskier, but that 5 mana plus scenario, something like this could be pretty cool. Now, we've never really seen Secret Mage work in that way, so who knows if that's possible, but a card like this points it in that direction at the very least. Up next here, we have the Whirlkick Master, a 2 mana 1/2. And it reads, whenever you play a combo card, add a random combo card to your hand. So this is like Underbelly Angler for Rogue with combo cards instead of Murlocs, which is pretty crazy. And I do like the idea here of generating multiple things and just chaining combos, because obviously once you start the chain, then following combos are going to come off nicely. But unfortunately, when I went and looked at the combo cards available in standard format right now, I have to say I was pretty disappointed. Something like 30 to 40% of them are cards that are played in Rogue fairly consistently. You got things like Edwin, Eviscerate, certainly your Evil Miscreants of the world. There are some like Cold Blood that are kind of iffy. SI7 Agent 2, I forgot. So on average, you're going to get a card that is not normally good enough to be played. There's all the like head cracks of the world out there, right? And what that means is your results here are middling at best. Occasionally, you'll be really happy to get an Edwin that you can play as your third card. Most of the time, though, it's going to be like, ugh, I didn't want to kidnap her. What on earth am I going to do with this? And beyond that, a lot of these are expensive cards. By expensive, I mean not 1 mana Murlocs like we've seen with Underbelly Angler. It can often get a lot of 1 mana Murlocs and just chain for a long, long time as long as you have mana. Of course, there are some 3 and 4 mana cards in the Murloc pool too, but still a lot of them are 1 or 2 mana. When you get to the combo cards, many of them are 3 mana or more, and I think they're all 2 mana or higher, so it's much harder to create a lot of additional incremental value off of your chains with Whirlkick Master. Beyond that, it's just a 1/2 for 2 mana. So there are a handful of things that make this much, much weaker than some comparative cards. And I do think this card's going to struggle because of that. I think it's a pretty bad play on its own. The combo cards all do sort of different things. Some of them are about face damage. Some are value generators. Some are big board plays. What that means is you're never going to get a consistent outcome of results. You're just going to have a bunch of mishmash stuff that's not really building towards a game plan, which means what kind of deck can run this consistently. And all in all, I see a lot of problems for this card to overcome, so I think it is going to fall short, even though it's a cool idea and a fun mechanic. I just don't think Rogue's going to make room for it. Our next card here is the Hooked Scimitar, a 3 mana 2/2 weapon for Rogue with a combo, gain +2 attack. Hey, here's a combo card to play with our previous one. But this is essentially a 4/2 weapon if you can get the combo off for 3 mana, which is really strong. Not something we usually see in Hearthstone. That's a lot of damage bundled into a 3 mana weapon. And clearly that could be great for a deck that values damage, as a lot of Rogue decks do. And in fact, you can actually bring back the old 4 mana prep raiding party weapon Dread Corsair combo with this card. Of course, prep got nerfed and that killed the Wagglepig version of it for 4 mana. You had to go up to 5 mana to do that now. But given that this is 1 mana cheaper than Wagglepig and can still achieve that 4 attack mark, you can actually do that again. Is that going to be worth it for a card like this? Maybe. That's something to keep an eye on. That was such a powerful combination, getting a big weapon in those Dread Corsairs. Of course, Hook Scimitar is worse than Wagglepick in a lot of ways because it doesn't have that bounce back effect, right? The bounce on the Wagglepick is amazing because Rogue loves bouncing stuff back to their hand, whether it's the Leroy for tons of damage, lackeys, miscreants, combo cards, etc. This is just raw damage output. And I think Rogue can sacrifice 1 mana for all those sneaky shenanigans. I don't think the Scimitar looks better to me than Wagglepick. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad card. It could still be played a ton, but it's in the same standard format rotation as Wagglepick, so it does have to make the cut over Wagglepick for some reason. I don't think there's enough advantage here to do that necessarily. Now, as a 3-mana 2/2, we should also talk about this card. I don't think it's worth it as a 3-mana 2/2. You really do need the combo to activate here, so it's going to feel pretty bad to be sitting on turn 3 and be like, should I play the Scimitar or not? Most of the time, it's going to be like something you kind of feel like you have to play to kill that Flame Imp or random Murloc or Knife Juggler or whatever it is, and you've compromised on a card in your deck that could just be something probably much, much more powerful. For instance, if you compare it to, like, you know, SI7 Agent, playing a 3/3 on turn 3 doesn't feel as bad perhaps to me as just getting that 2/2 weapon. So the default state of some other combo cards are better than the default state of this one, and I don't think the combo upside state of this is worth all that much more. It's very strong, certainly, but there is that, you know, activation risk necessary to consider as well. So what we have here, long story short, I think, is a reasonable looking weapon that can be played, but at the end of the day, there are better alternatives I think most decks will utilize instead. So now moving on to the Splitting Axe, a 4-mana 3/2 weapon for Shaman with a battle cry that reads summon copies of your totems. Now we all know this is really called the Ghostly Battle Axe in World of Warcraft, but I guess they gave it a different name for some reason. But we have here a nifty card that can get you a lot of on-board value if it works. You know, you can copy Nightmare Amalgams, for instance. Those are totems. So this could be a 4-mana 3/2 that summons you an extra 3/4, and that would be pretty nice. You also have things like Flame Tongue totems and Mana Tide totems that have some upside. But most of the time, I think you'll probably be getting basic totems off of this card. Those are what most Shaman decks utilize and what tend to linger around on board more than anything else. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a great thing. Getting a couple extra random basic totems feels pretty weak. Like, yeah, spell damage can be nice. Healing totems very occasionally. Taunt totems a bit of an interruption. But you are running a weapon here that is considerably worse than other weapons from a stat line standpoint, right? This is that Fiery War Axe stat line. Back in the good old days, you would have paid 2 mana for this, even compared to something like Lickum right now. You know, that's a 3/3 that's far cheaper as long as you have those activations of Overload for it. So when I compare this to other things, I don't think the sacrifice on stat lines here is really worth it for me to get copies of totems. You'd have to build the deck pretty specifically to get the right sort of totems out there to make this worth it. Like, I think you'd want one of those 3-mana totems or higher to really get this there, and currently 3-mana totems are our peak. So I don't know why you'd run this at this moment, but I will admit, if there's some super totem that comes out, which is always a possibility, if there is a deck that can utilize all of those bigger totems successfully, if there's some combo with the Serpent Ward totem that can do some crazy face damage, then yeah, this card has a path towards success. Do I expect it to be great? No, not necessarily. Do I think it could be played in some deck out there? Yeah, sure. That wraps it up for our detailed reviews. Now let's jump into some quick reviews. Mogu Cultist is a 2-star card. Torte Pilgrim is a 3-star card. Hooked Scimitar is a 3-star card. Splitting Axe is a 3-star card. Whirlkick Master is a 2-star card. Cloud Prince is a 4-star card. Arcane Flakmage is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. Quite a mixed bag this time around. I'm super excited for some of these cards. Others I'm doubtful of, but they certainly seem to have a chance. So share your thoughts on these in the comments below. But until then, thanks much for watching. And until next time, game on.